Hey, y'all, you're listening to the Immersion podcast. Here on the show, we'll learn from guests from all walks of life, exploring the impact of character on the mundane and the extraordinary alike. Thanks for joining. I'm your host, Ben Liu, and if you enjoyed today's episode, go share it with a friend. Just like that.
Let's go.
Let's
It's
go.
perfectly done. Every
Awesome.
time.
Right? Something like that, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get these bad boys off. Anyways, to anyone who's watching, we're doing a little bit of a switch up. Hi, we're on video. Check us out on YouTube, Immersion Culture, somewhere in there, something like that. I've recognized that in doing this podcast that I can't afford to be a perfectionist on it because I'm constantly on the go. I'm a business owner. I'm a freelancer. I'm a friend, and I love to be present with people. So being a perfectionist on a podcast doesn't make sense. It's not the main thing for me, and I can be a perfectionist about other things,
Right.
or at least try not to be.
Right.
But today I'm so excited to have my friend Jaime Reyes from Kingsfield Grooming. He's been a longtime friend. We've been friends for,
8
9 years? How long has Kingsfield been open?
8 years.
We've been friends a little before Kingsfield opened. So let's call it 8.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
I've
a long
known
time.
Jaime. Yeah, it's been a very long time. Gosh. Jaime has seen me as a little child, practically, before I even really started photos, or as I was getting started in photos and now into film. He is a phenomenal confidant, phenomenal friend. We've gone on tons of adventures, had a lot of great moments talking about life with each other, and really spurring each other on to really go after life to the fullest, whether in the good moments, the bad moments, or just in the moments where you're like, all right, we're just here. We're just existing. Yeah. But I love Jaime. He's one of the people I love to see every single day. In fact, we joke, we have this routine where I just come down to the shop right below Desert Oasis in Rochester, and I just say, hey, just checking in, just walking through, no big deal. And that's been my routine for the last few years, especially when I got this very studio. Jaime, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, from your family to the business of Kingsfield, and we can kind of roll from there, man.
Yeah. So my name's Jaime Reyes. So I own Kingsfield Grooming. We've been open 8 years, and we started it from nothing. We literally borrowed the money to open, and it's been on, a learning curve that we've existed. But now, in our 8th year of business, I think we figured it out, and we're ready for all the next steps. I think we've did the downturns and the upturns and all those things, and so I'm really excited to see our future and where we plan to go ahead. But more about my journey alone. I mean, it doesn't begin at Kingsfield. My journey begins in the very beginning. I guess I started cutting hair the first time I actually took some snips at it was 21, and then I didn't maybe start cutting all the time until I was 25.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, it was about 25. It was
Okay.
It was every, that's all I did for my main means of income. Because before that I did hardwood floors, and all during that time I was lost, you just don't know, I knew floors wasn't going to be for me. And then you think what else is there out there, and then I always wanted to cut hair, but back then cutting hair wasn't
A thing.
it wasn't as admirable as maybe it is now,
Yeah. It didn't have the glamour behind it.
No, not like that. I mean, I've been 16 years going on 17 years in the business like that, and it definitely didn't start that way. We had to make it what it was, and back then lineups and tapers and fades, really short haircuts were the thing. And especially coming up where I came up, I'm from Pontiac, Michigan. And if you don't know Pontiac, it's kind of a rough area. And so, like, just coming up out there, I mean, you just get a different kind of mentality about life. And then how you kind of approach different things. And then my approach to hair back then was a lot different. Towards everything, because I feel like all those things kind of affect how you think and do your life,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I loved living life alongside you, was understanding that like you literally had nothing, and you didn't have the best influences in the world around you.
Oh no.
Let alone the resources, the access, any kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
You just knew, like, kind of cut hair and kind of call it from there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, during all that time, and life was throwing a lot at me. I had a daughter at 25 or 24 years old, and that was kind of like the catalyst of it all. Like, you have to do something, you know what I mean? And in the beginning of the recession, like, nobody was getting their floors done. Any kind of amenities they were not doing, you know
Right.
what I mean? So recession didn't fully hit until like 2008, but it was
Correct.
2006 when I really started to feel those effects. And that's when I started cutting hair. I mean, I tried to get a job at McDonald's and they wouldn't hire me.
No way.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was me or I don't know what it was.
Kind of shoots your confidence down a little bit.
I mean, I didn't feel like I could get a job at McDonald's.
Yeah, I guess if this is the bar for entry, to just contribute. Yeah.
But thank God I didn't, though, because I started cutting hair very quickly after that. And I made it happen, And during that time, where I was cutting hair at, I was cutting hair in Pontiac. And there was like eight or nine guys that were basically like everyone just kind of picked up where I was picking up too. And that's the kind of shop we were at. And it was just like this bunch of macho stuff going on there. And it really kind of molded me in my influence, and it really kind of tore me up. And I had to like really rebuild from that kind of thinking, and also what was going on in my life at that time too, because I had my daughter, and I had relationship issues and everything, and that was really rough.
Totally. Real quick, go ahead and just push the mic up a little closer to you.
Oh, okay.
And then that way it's like really clear on you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we go back?
I'm not too worried.
Okay.
I think it's like the whole like learning process, and eventually I'll just declare that you're going to be on more and more podcasts.
Right.
Plus I'll cut that part out of the switching and transitioning. Man. So, I mean, to give reference, like Pontiac's not just like a no-name town. Like the country knows Pontiac, majority.
Yeah, I mean,
one way or another.
Well, everybody knows Pontiac cars.
Yeah.
The car was actually named
after
because of the city, because of where. Yeah, their plant was in Pontiac.
Crazy.
Yeah, Fisher Body.
Okay.
I mean, it's not there no more.
Right.
But that's where it started.
Yeah, and I mean, like, man, I think in current day, a lot of people flippantly talk about like, oh yeah, like something about the hood, but you like lived in the hood.
Well, I mean, other people's experience of the hood probably a lot different than mine. But like I said, like if you just drove through, you ain't gonna think too much. But like growing up, in the school system and everything too, like that really makes a difference. Like even if you don't live on the same street,
right,
as somewhere else, like all the same influences are, because all the streets are, like you got good areas and worse areas, and then just even how we talk to each other. I mean, I just turned 41, and so like back when I was coming up, it was a lot of gang influence back then. You know what I mean? And it really takes a toll on you. Especially I have family and all that, and that's who I let influence me, because they were like directly older than me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. By only a few years. Not even. And so like you see that stuff in school, and then you see a family, and then you start to build this kind of mentality of it. You know what I mean? But if it's all around you, there's no one else think, especially if you like it,
Right. Yeah.
if it looks
If you like
glamorous
it and
a little,
you find like your little piece in it where you
just
feel,
a little, no, I was never like real, like super duper hood,
Yeah.
but definitely you can't help it.
Yeah. It was just your world at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So then walk us through how you found a space here in Rochester. Because to go from Pontiac to Rochester, for reference, it's like maybe a 20-minute drive, not even.
No.
But it's a very different side of town in the same county.
Oh, I mean, it's black and white, because out here, I mean, you can leave your doors open probably,
Yeah.
I've seen people like leave a nice bike outside, not chained up, nothing, and stayed overnight and nobody touch it. A purse.
Yeah. Unbothered.
Like, hey, who lost a purse? That ain't happening anywhere where I grew up. That's unthought of.
Right.
It's gone.
Yeah.
But the way we got here though, I was starting to clean things up. I had just turned 30 years old, and I had been feeling like just before that, like this big tug to like give my life to the Lord, and I had kind of always felt that. I didn't kind of always felt that. I have always felt called. I've always felt like I believed in God. I always felt something with me, protecting me. And when things would, because I was an alcoholic all during my 20s. That's all I did. 5 days a week, I'm out hanging out, and well, I mean, a lot changed when I got my daughter, like all the time. But I was still out there though. I was still hanging and doing my thing, and then I got this really big tug, like when I was about to turn 30. I mean, that probably happens to a lot of people, but what it did for me is I just had to have the strength to make that commitment to change, and I tell you what, it wasn't easy. There was nights like when I made that decision, I was in a relationship, and I felt God calling me to get out of it because I needed to work on myself, and I was in no position to be in a relationship with anybody. It wasn't good, because it wasn't healthy. Nothing in my life was healthy at the time, and so I needed to have that alone time to get right. And so what I did is I got out of the relationship, and I just kind of made that commitment to myself to go to church, because I didn't understand. Months after I made that commitment, I was going to another church that I came up through. I got baptized when I was like 19 or 20 years old there, and I received the Holy Spirit there actually. And then my little cousin had he died. He was going through some stuff, but he ended up committing suicide, and that was really rough. And it happened during my sister's wedding reception. And man, I mean, it messed everybody up. And it did affect me in a way where I was already in that time where I needed to change, and that was like another fire that I was like, I can't, because he was such a special kid. Like he was, like when you look at someone, you like, dude, like there's something awesome about you. And so I would hang out with him, I'd cut his hair, and he used to break dance all the time. And so like that was one of the things like they would always show like his silhouette of, because we had this thing we'd do for him called the Maya Mile. I think it still goes on. And that's how bad it it affected a lot of people. So with that, I went to the church that we had his funeral at, and he was a part of this thing called The Gathering. It was a young adults ministry, and so I decided to go. And from there, I'm like, man, like so many great things happened, and so many chains fell off my life, and I got free from alcohol there, and all that stuff. And man, that's when the ball started rolling. And then I never had my license for hair. I started, and then life happened, and I had to move away, and so I did. I moved away, and then I said, I'm going to go back because, that was a goal of mine. I wasn't going to
Just
be an
quit.
imposter.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? Like cutting hair without license for so long. I knew I can get away with it for a while, but I knew that I wanted more from cutting hair. I knew that was like my way into whatever I was looking for. And so, um, especially with what I always liked growing up, I knew I wanted to work within hair, fashion, and um, just around that kind of thing. And I knew what kind of like barber I wanted. I knew what kind of pedigree I wanted to be top
Absolutely.
tier. You know what I mean? And that's where I'm still working for. 16 years later, I'm still working for that. But that's where everything started, was the gathering. And then, man, I met my wife, there, and while I was in school, and it was just things happened. I mean, like I made that commitment to God, and it seemed like the doors just started just flying open. I felt like He had me on a fast track, to be honest, to kind of catch up for everything. Like, for the time I feel like I lost, that I was in my 20s.
A redeeming of time.
I would feel like that, you know, and now that it's been so long now, and I look back, and I was so uncomfortable with all that change, and now that I'm really I do well with it now. Um, it feels like, it's good. If I took longer, it might not happen.
Have rolled out the way it does.
Yeah.
It has, rather.
I always try to say yes, even if it seemed like it was over my head. I kind of put faith in the people around me to help make it happen. I mean, if I didn't have certain people in my corner, it would have never happened.
For sure. For sure. Man, that's so cool. Because, like, in the process of feeling one loss, you were looking for something, some sort of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just literally expounded itself and multiplied and multiplied and multiplied to the point now it's like your actual center point of where your life is currently.
Yeah.
Right? Because now it's like the fruition of Kingsfield, the fruition of your family, fruition of a few other odds and ends things where you're like, now you get to do business with your cousin, JJ?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, my nephew.
Nephew, my bad. I keep forgetting. I'm like, he's got a big family, folks, okay? You're going to see another one of these guys soon.
No, everybody's family.
Everybody's family.
Always.
Family.
Or I've been knowing somebody since we were young.
Mm-hmm.
I always have everybody in there.
Which is crazy. You're like, which is so interesting, because then, like, I think of our interactions. And I found this always so interesting about you, even though I didn't recognize it until maybe a few years into our relationship or into our friendship, that, like, you're always really good at teaching people. And even just, like, being able to call people out on just, like, little things where you're like, hey, really? Like, think about it. Like, and not abashed, not, like, strong, like, the heck is wrong with you, versus, like, hey, you might want to think about that a little more thoroughly. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I guess that's one of those internal things, but now that you say it, like, I see that, and I know where it comes from. It comes from, like, I wouldn't want to be talked to like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, personally, I don't do good with authority. You know what I mean? Yeah. I hate it.
I get it.
And if you talk to me that way, I'm probably going to look at you sideways. you know?
Like, the heck? Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, like, I just try to give everybody the same respect, Like, yo, I mean, don't make that mistake. Go ahead. That's on you. But I'm going to let you know right now, like, you shouldn't do that.
Absolutely. Would you say now, as you're in your 40s, that relationships is something that you would have really wanted to focus on when you were younger? Like, do you think that made that much of a difference, like having that support system and community?
Relationships as in, like,
just like friends and connections, different things like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've always been able to make friends pretty easy. So, like, maybe that's why I just always end up in situations that I do. It's just because I'm kind of an open book all the time,
This is true. We've gone on a few adventures, and I've just seen this guy just befriend everybody, and I'm like, okay. But then again, I also see you at the coffee shop, and like you're also friends with everybody, and I'm like, okay, this guy's cool.
Yeah. Well, it's just,
Natural to me.
I don't know, like, how to not be authentic. And actually, like, people that kind of have that closed off personality, we just clash. You know, if you're super like,
See yourself.
yeah, like standoffish, and it's not that I clash. I just keep it pushing.
Yeah.
You know, but
Absolutely. But that's what I love. And then like having seen our friendship develop, like I've learned so much from you, from just like really tough conversations to little things like, like I have friends now who compliment my style, and to the fact like I had a little bit and it was okay. I look back now and I'm like, yeah, that was definitely okay. But Jaime really, really developed that for me. And like truly you have, where it's like understanding like the little nuances. And I remember in high school I was like, oh, I'm gonna change from like this emo scene to like I'm just only gonna shop at H&M, and then I just knew what I liked and just never gave it any thought. But you give Ryman reason, understanding that there's pieces to your wardrobe that have to be spotlighted, that have to be all these other things, so that way the rest of your wardrobe fits, right? So that way your closet fits, and it's never just like some random piece. It can be a random piece if it makes sense. If it like even it could be a little out of place, but if it is that cool out of place where it does complement, like I was like, man, like never, like I would have just stayed with,
right, because then everything starts to look like the same color.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's like, ooh.
Yeah. And
can't
if
do that.
anyone knows me, it's been a black Dickies, black t-shirt for a very, very long time.
Yeah. And we locked ourselves into like even certain sizes, textures.
Yeah.
But just creating balance throughout style and fashion. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously that's just something I've always liked, and I feel like only up until now I've recently lost a lot of weight, and so I found like this new confidence. Well, obviously it has to be new because I've never been this thin in my life ever. So like now that I'm kind of able to wear the things I want to wear and really tailor it down. So specifically causing balance throughout like your wardrobe, and finding a certain style that can fit, and being able to like use it in all different senses. So like if you can still have the same style and you're going out, casual, and then dress down, and being able to not have too many pieces in your wardrobe where you have this large closet of stuff, where you can still keep it simple, but like how do you keep it looking the same and you're going to the gym?
Right.
You know what I mean? How do you keep it looking the same from the summer to the winter?
Right.
Because that's a hard transition for most people. I feel like we move through fashion like as if like it's just evolve, it's just evolved from one whole style to the next, and I personally I can't stand that.
Agreed. Tedious.
And so what I've done is I give it a lot of thought, but I've made it super easy now though too. You just kind of find, so what I've done is find certain brands, and so when I find a brand, and then I look from who were their influences, and so I always try to find something where it's more like a piece, where it's a more expensive item, and then combine that with another like company that sells good quality pieces for the low, for
attainable,
not obtainable price for sure. You got to. And so as you do that, like I like it evolves from there. So it's always going to grow, but it's always going to stay in the same type of pocket.
Similar core.
Yeah. Because you're always growing. One thing I've noticed, like at people my age, is like they all kind of like slow down to a sense where you get really comfortable in I've noticed that in such a way where like
it turns me off so bad where I can't, like, no, I never want to stop growing. I never want to stop thinking of myself as not having growth. So like I'm going to evolve through my whole life, you know. I'm always going to be someone that's thirsty for knowledge and going after something. I've seen it throughout my whole life. Like as soon as someone like gets a little bit older and feels like they got something, they just kind of slow down and that's it, you know. And and it's good. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't mind that, but I don't see that for myself though.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think honestly that leans towards a lot of your character. Having lived life with you, you know, I remember our first trip.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man. And I think this really is the dynamic of iron sharpen iron, or like just having a brotherhood altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Of like people you can confide in, build each other up, and still be able to call each other out on any and every little thing, right? But I remember that moment when you were like, yeah, I want to go on one of these trips that you go on. And I'm like, heck yeah, like, you're my boy. Like, you're not just my barber, you're my boy. And man, we're going to the Smoky Mountains, and I remember it's late. We're driving from Kentucky because we realized that we could skip out an event that we had to, you know, partially attend. And we pull up to Klingman's Dome, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's like, it's winter. It's February. And I'm looking at Tony, our friend, who went along with us and helped really orchestrate the trip.
I'll never forget
And we're
that.
like, man, like, oh man, like the gate's closed. I'm sure we could probably get to it. And so we're all like kind of getting ready. There's a bunch of cars trying to figure out what they want to do. We pull off. We're getting ready. Jamie's checking the gate to kind of see like how far it could potentially be, if there's any sign markers. Granted, this is first time at a national park. Yeah.
I had never been anywhere before that.
Never been hiking, anything like that. And it's close to sunset at this point. And me and Tony are like, we doing this? It's 16 miles from where we're at exactly to the top where the original parking lot is before the half-mile hike up to Klingman's Dome. And it's cold, it's windy, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. And we're like, should we tell him? No. And you literally were a champ. You made it halfway through before you were like, how far do we really have to go? And we broke the news to you. And we told you something like 12 miles when it was really 16 and all these other things. And you were such a champ at it. But I remember the breaking point where along the trip, you were like, I don't get it. Why haven't I like experience change? Like, you go on these trips, Ben, you're changed.
Mm-hmm.
But then we like walked through that. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah.
Like, what was that like for you? Because in that place you were looking for hope, you were looking for some kind of breakthrough, something that was completely out of the norm, at least for your norm of routine and different things like that.
Yeah, I was going through it that year. There was so much going on, you know. I mean, we were at such a little breaking point, you know, there was so much going on, like life and business, and I was about to be a dad that, you know, I just found out that we're having my daughter. And so I was feeling like a lot of stress, and I was trying to figure life out at the time, man. I was donezo. And I was just tapped out. And so I went on that trip looking for something. And so what I was looking for is, like you said, like I was looking for hope. Because at the time, like that kind of, that much responsibility that was on top of me at the time was too much to handle. I wasn't able to handle all that. And so when we were there at Klingman's Dome, I'll never forget when we get to the very end, you know, and there's like that little hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew like my legs were just shaky and the wind was blowing, like 35,
No, it had
40
to be
miles
like
an hour.
60. Because I mean,
No, there's no way.
yeah,
It
man.
was-
Like, no, it was definitely closer to 60. Now that I've experienced 60-mile-per-hour winds in West Texas,
oh, okay.
I like
Okay, so
where
you
you're
know.
feeling like you're being blown over.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Yeah.
For sure. If it wasn't for that wind being to my back and like pushing me up that hill and you being there with me, like I would have had to just stay right there just before you could see the dome and its sights. But man, it was like I felt something pushing me up that hill, you know, and I felt hope. And we've talked about that so many times that I mean it makes me forget at certain times, but how much that trip really did for me. I did receive a lot from that trip. It was something I'd never done before. I mean, just before that trip, before there, we were in Kentucky, and I didn't even have any like hiking gear at all. We had to go and buy a bunch of stuff. So I had shoes, and that was it.
Yeah. No jacket, no fleece, no
Nothing.
hat, no gloves, nothing.
Nothing, not one thing. And I would have been out there with nothing. And so I was feeling super unprepared. And I was still out of shape then, like super out of shape. And walking back was a piece of cake compared to like getting there though. I was just scared of all them bears, so.
No, we were on top of the mountain. We were fine. But like between the ice and the snow and the wind, it was a lot. And, you know, by the time we got to the car, it was already midnight. So it took us 6 hours. Granted, it was all on pavement and ice and snow. So it was rough.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, it was a lot. But that kind of set us up for the next trip though too.
Yeah.
Because we directly went on another trip after that, like the next year.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and I want to be respectful of your time here because he's got another appointment. Do you feel like the intentionality you needed to go through that hike was something that you could translate back into your personal life because of how hard it was? I like how you said that you were so unprepared, and thinking back on your past, I mean, kind of were unequipped, maybe even.
Yeah, I mean, because I went through something hard there, and something so like mentally tough. Everything got so much easier when I got back. It was like the little things that I let get to me weren't so hard anymore. It was just like, okay, I did something tough, you know, I'm good. And just kind of maybe that feeling of accomplishment, you know, and then seeing those mountains and breathing that fresh air. I mean, once you've done a hike like that, it's so addictive to be in that environment. And like, I know exactly why you want to be outdoors all the time. And I do too now. And so I really kind of look forward to that once a year trip.
Yeah.
You know,
to the point that like you're talking about potentially taking your family down to like Hawken Hills. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously right now they're just, it would be a little too tough. My wife's not like a big camping type of person. So I'm going to have to give it a little bit of time before we do the real stuff we like to do. But yeah, definitely some glamping out in Hawken Hills.
Heck yeah. Well, hey, I again love you so much, and I respect your time. And you know, I think the big takeaway is being able to like doing the hard thing to find hope, right? Doing things that, you know, you might not have.
Always going to being uncomfortable.
Okay.
I that's one thing I've always talked about too. Like, it's like, if you're comfortable in life, you know, like you need to shake it up. You know, there's different kind of uncomfortabilities, obviously. Like, we're not talking about like if you're not struggling, you know, but if you don't have like a goal, you know, there needs to be a constant goal. And I think one thing that really makes me better all the time, and what will continue to have me feel like I'm getting better, is like knowing that I'm not the best, and I'll never really be the best. And so like having that kind of pressure on myself, it takes me to that next level. It also causes a lot of self-awareness. So knowing that I'm not terrible or I suck or anything, but having that that kind of like
humble approach to like continually get better.
Right.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. And then, you know, I think the last point I really wanted to ask for those who are listening, for those who are finding themselves in a place where they might not have hope, like in being, you know, following along the lines of being uncomfortable, to someone who maybe was in your position growing up or still is in your position still growing up. What would you, man, any piece of advice? Like if you could almost like go back in time and speak to a younger self, what would that be like?
Oh man.
No,
if I can go back and tell this kid, I would tell him like you can't let your environment like predict like what you're gonna do. Like stop caring about other people's opinions about how cool you are or how tough or what you're listening to or what you're wearing, you know. Don't worry about those things. Like if you know where you want your life to be or how you want your life to be at least, and you're being yourself authentically throughout it, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. And those people aren't going to be in your life later on, you know, because eventually if you do change your mentality, everything is attitude. And attitude is like your mentality, right? And so like how you would choose to approach people in the day and thinking about your life, you know, and your responsibilities if you don't make it overly heavy. You know, us men, we have a lot of responsibilities. I feel like we shy away from things because we don't want to take that on. And that's basically this like it. So like attitude, get away from the crowd of people that you don't really want to be around anyways, and just stay focused. Focus is so key. Know what you want, focus on it, and don't worry about people's opinions.
Boom. Love it. That's awesome. Well, if you guys are looking for a great haircut to be styled by one of Jaime's teams, go check out Kingsfield Grooming in downtown Rochester. We're right below Desert Oasis in Rochester. Jaime is often booked out ahead of times because he is so excellent at what he does, but the rest of the team is phenomenal.
Yes. Well, thank you for your support, Ben. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Love you, bud.
Love you too.